At my cousin's wedding reception, my sister Maya stood up during the toasts and announced to the entire crowd that I was a dangerous criminal who had been living a double life. She told them I was involved in illegal weapons trading and that she had evidence. What she didn't know was that the weapons she'd seen in my apartment weren't illegal contraband. They were part of my classified work as a federal counterterrorism operative. And her evidence was about to expose a conspiracy that went deeper than either of us could have imagined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Sofia Reyes, and until 3 months ago, I thought the most dangerous thing in my life was my sister's tendency to dramatize everything. I was wrong. Dead wrong. The autumn air in Chicago carried the scent of burning leaves and the promise of winter as I stood in the ornate ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel, watching my cousin Isabella dance with her new husband. The chandeliers cast warm golden light across the sea of elegant guests, and the string quartet played something classical and forgettable. I should have been happy. This was supposed to be a celebration, a rare moment when our fractured family came together for something beautiful instead of another crisis. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. My sister Maya had been watching me all evening with the intensity of a hawk circling its prey. Every time I caught her eye, she would quickly look away, but not before I saw something unsettling there. Not the usual sibling rivalry or petty resentment. This was different. This was calculating. Maya had always been the golden child in our family. At 28, she was a successful marketing executive at a prestigious firm in downtown Chicago, the kind of daughter our parents could brag about at dinner parties. She lived in a pristine high-rise apartment in River North, drove a white Tesla, and had an Instagram feed that looked like a lifestyle magazine. Everything about her life was carefully curated, perfectly presented, socially acceptable. I was the opposite. At 31, I told people I worked in government consulting when they asked what I did for a living. My apartment in Logan Square was sparse and functional, furnished with secondhand furniture and blackout curtains. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic and hadn't posted anything on social media in over 2 years. To most people, including my family, I appeared to be drifting through life without ambition or direction. They had no idea that I was a special agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, working deep cover operations that required me to maintain the most boring civilian identity possible. They couldn't know that the consulting work that took me away for weeks at a time involved infiltrating domestic terrorist cells and arms trafficking networks. The less interesting I appeared to the outside world, the better I could do my job. The deception had cost me more than I like to admit. My parents, Roberto and Carmen Reyes, looked at me with a mixture of disappointment and confusion that never quite left their eyes. They didn't understand why their daughter, who had graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern with a degree in international relations, was apparently wasting her life in some undefined government job that barely seemed to pay the bills. During family gatherings, they would make subtle comments about Maya's latest promotion or her new designer handbag, while I sat quietly eating my enchiladas and nodding along. The worst part was that I couldn't defend myself. I couldn't tell them that 3 months ago, I had single-handedly prevented a bombing at Union Station that would have killed hundreds of people. I couldn't mention the commendation letter locked away in a classified file somewhere in Washington, or the fact that the Attorney General herself had personally thanked me for my work. My heroism was invisible, my sacrifices unrecognized, my true self hidden behind a carefully constructed facade of mediocrity. As the evening wore on, I noticed Maya moving through the crowd with unusual purpose. She wasn't just socializing, she was collecting people, whispering in their ears, building some kind of consensus. I watched her approach our Uncle Miguel, then our cousin Fernando, then Isabella's new mother-in-law. Each conversation was brief but intense, and I could see the concerned expressions spreading across their faces as they glanced in my direction. My instincts, honed by years of surveillance work, told me to leave. Something was building, and Maya was orchestrating it. But this was Isabella's wedding, and I couldn't just disappear without causing exactly the kind of scene that would validate whatever narrative Maya was constructing about me. So I stayed, nursing a glass of wine and trying to look like the harmless, slightly disappointed relative everyone expected me to be.
The moment came during the toasts. Isabella's father had just finished a tearful speech about love and commitment when Maya arose from her seat at the head table. She was stunning in her emerald green dress, her dark hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked like someone who had important things to say, and the room naturally quieted to listen. "I need to tell you all something," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. "Something about my sister Sofia that I can't keep quiet about anymore." My blood went cold. Every eye in the room turned toward me, and I felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with my cover identity. This wasn't professional surveillance. This was personal betrayal, and somehow that made it infinitely more terrifying. "I love my sister," Maya continued, her voice breaking with what sounded like genuine emotion. "But I've discovered something about her that I can't ignore anymore. Something that puts all of us in danger." The room was dead silent now. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears as Maya reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. "Last week, I went to Sofia's apartment to surprise her with dinner. I used the spare key she gave me for emergencies. And what I found there," she paused, looking directly at me with what I could only describe as righteous fury. "What I found there were weapons, military-grade weapons, ammunition, equipment that no civilian should have." A collective gasp went through the crowd. I saw my mother's face go white, my father's jaw clench with anger and disappointment. Isabella looked like she was about to cry, her perfect wedding moment crumbling in real time. Maya pulled out a series of photographs from the envelope. Even from across the room, I could see they were pictures of my apartment, specifically my bedroom closet where I kept my service weapon and tactical gear. She had violated my privacy, invaded my space, and photographed evidence of my classified work without having any idea what she was really looking at. "These aren't hunting rifles or sports shooting equipment," Maya announced, holding up the photos for everyone to see. "These are assault weapons, the kind used by terrorists and criminals. My sister has been lying to all of us about who she really is and what she's been doing." The room erupted in confused murmurs and shocked whispers. I could see people pulling out their phones, probably calling the police or at least texting about the drama unfolding at what was supposed to be a joyous celebration. My cover, my career, my entire carefully constructed life was disintegrating in front of 200 wedding guests. But the worst part wasn't the professional catastrophe. The worst part was seeing the look on my parents' faces, the betrayal and fear in their eyes as they stared at their daughter who had apparently been living a lie. Maya had just destroyed not only my operational security, but also any chance I had of maintaining a relationship with my family. "I've already called the authorities," Maya announced, her voice stronger now, more confident.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
They should be here any minute. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I couldn't be complicit in whatever illegal activities my sister has been involved in. As summoned by her words, I heard the distinctive sound of sirens approaching the hotel. Maya had actually done it. She had actually called the police on her own sister, based on a handful of photographs she didn't understand. In her determination to be the responsible one, the good daughter, the hero of her own story, she had just committed what amounted to an act of war against everything I had worked for. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. Maya looked triumphant, vindicated, absolutely convinced that she was doing the right thing. She had no idea that she had just set in motion a chain of events that would expose not only my true identity, but also a conspiracy that had been brewing in the shadows of Chicago's federal law enforcement community for months. The ballroom doors burst open, and 6 Chicago police officers stormed in, their hands on their weapons, their eyes scanning the crowd for the suspected criminal. Maya pointed directly at me, her finger steady and sure. "That's her," she announced. "That's my sister, Sofia Reyes. She's the one with the illegal weapons." As the officers approached me, their faces stern and professional, I reached slowly into my jacket pocket. Maya's eyes widened, probably thinking I was going for a weapon.
Instead, I pulled out a small leather wallet and flipped it up to reveal my federal badge and identification. The lead officer stopped, dead in his tracks when he saw it. His expression shifted from suspicion to confusion to something approaching respect. He leaned in to examine the badge more closely, then looked up at me with a question in his eyes. "Special Agent Sofia Reyes, ATF," I said quietly, my voice carrying just enough authority to cut through the chaos. "And we need to talk." The silence that followed my badge revelation was deafening. 200 wedding guests stared at me with expressions ranging from confusion to embarrassment to dawning horror. Maya's face had gone completely pale, her triumphant smile melting into something resembling terror. The photographs she still clutched in her hands suddenly looked less like evidence of criminal activity and more like proof of her own spectacular miscalculation. The lead police officer, Sergeant Martinez, according to his name tag, studied my credentials with the careful attention of someone who knew the difference between real federal identification and the countless fake badges that crossed his desk. After what felt like an eternity, he handed the wallet back to me and turned to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying the authority of 15 years on the Chicago police force. "There appears to have been a misunderstanding. This is a federal law enforcement officer, and the items in question are part of her official duties." A wave of murmurs swept through the ballroom. I watched Maya sink into her chair, her face buried in her hands. Isabella stood frozen near the head table, her wedding dress pristine, but her celebration ruined. My parents looked like they were processing a revelation that fundamentally challenged everything they thought they knew about their eldest daughter. Maya remained seated, staring at the photographs scattered across the table in front of her. When she finally looked up at me, her eyes were red-rimmed and filled with something I couldn't quite identify. Regret, maybe? Or fear? Or the dawning realization that her attempt to be the responsible sister had backfired spectacularly. I walked over to her table, my footsteps echoing in the now mostly empty ballroom. The string quartet had long since packed up their instruments, and the catering staff was beginning to clear the abandoned dinner plates. The elegant celebration had devolved into a crime scene cleanup. "Maya," I said, keeping my voice level and professional, "we need to talk." She looked up at me with the expression of a child who had been caught doing something terrible, but wasn't entirely sure what it was. "Sofia, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know you were—" She gestured helplessly at the badge still visible in my jacket pocket. "You didn't know because you weren't supposed to know. That's how classified work functions. It requires secrecy, even from family members." The words hit her like a physical blow. Maya had always prided herself on being the responsible one, the sister who made good decisions and followed the rules. The realization that she had potentially damaged a federal investigation by those same impulses was clearly devastating to her. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Did I ruin your career? Are you in trouble because of what I did?" I wished I could give her a simple answer, but the truth was far more complicated. My phone had been buzzing constantly since the police arrived. Text messages and calls from my supervisor, my team members, and the duty officer at the Chicago field office. Word was already spreading through federal law enforcement channels that an ATF agent's cover had been blown in spectacular fashion at a wedding reception. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But Maya, I need you to understand something. Those photographs you took, the information you shared tonight, it doesn't just affect me. There are ongoing investigations, active cases, people whose lives might be in danger if the wrong individuals find out about my real job." Her face crumpled as the full weight of her actions settled on her shoulders. "I was trying to protect people," she whispered. "When I saw those weapons, I thought you had gotten involved with dangerous people. I thought you were going to hurt someone or get yourself killed." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of understanding for my sister's perspective. Maya lived in a world where weapons meant violence, where secrecy meant criminal activity, where sisters told each other everything. She had no context for the reality of federal law enforcement, no understanding of the sacrifices required to keep people safe from threats they would never even know existed. But understanding her motivations didn't undo the damage she had caused. My phone rang again, and this time I recognized the number. It was Special Agent in Charge Rebecca Torres, my boss and one of the most formidable women in federal law enforcement. I had to take this call. "Excuse me," I told Maya, stepping away from the table and answering the phone. "Reyes," Torres said without preamble, "what the hell happened tonight?" I gave her a brief, factual summary of the evening's events, leaving out the emotional devastation and focusing on the operational implications. As I spoke, I could hear Torres typing, probably pulling up security protocols and damage assessment procedures. "How many people witnessed this?" she asked. "Approximately 200 wedding guests, plus 6 Chicago PD officers and unknown social media exposure." The silence that followed was telling. Torres was calculating the scope of the breach, determining which cases might be compromised, figuring out how to contain the fallout. "We need to debrief immediately. Can you be at the field office in an hour?" I looked around the ballroom at my devastated family, at Maya still crying over her photographs, at Isabella trying to salvage what remained of her wedding reception. "Yes, ma'am. I'll be there." After ending the call, I returned to where my parents and Maya were now sitting together, forming a small circle of confusion and regret. They looked up at me expectantly, as if I might have some explanation that would make sense of the evening's chaos. "I have to go," I told them. "This situation has created some work complications that I need to address immediately." My father stood up, his face creased with concern. "Mija," he said, using the nickname he hadn't called me in years. "Are you in trouble? Is there anything we can do to help?" The question almost broke my composure. For 3 years, I had carried the weight of my double life alone, protecting my family from the dangerous realities of my work while simultaneously protecting my work from the complications of family involvement. Now that the barriers had been breached, I realized how much I had missed having their support. "I don't know yet, Papa," I said honestly. "But right now, the best thing you can do is not talk about what happened tonight. Don't post anything online. Don't discuss it with friends or neighbors. Don't even talk about it among yourselves unless you're absolutely certain you're in a private space." Maya looked up at me with fresh tears in her eyes. "Sophia, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I was just trying to protect you." I knelt down beside her chair, looking directly into her eyes. "Maya, I know you meant well, but this isn't over. What you did tonight, it's going to have consequences that go beyond our family. There are people out there who would use this information to hurt innocent people, and now they might have access to it." Her face drained from the color as she began to understand the true scope of what she had unleashed. "What can I do?" she asked desperately. "How can I fix this?" "You can't," I said simply. "This can't be fixed, only managed. And right now, I need to go figure out how to manage it." I kissed my parents goodbye, hugged Isabella one more time, and walked out of the Palmer House Hotel into the cold Chicago night. As I drove toward the Federal Building, my mind was already shifting into crisis management mode. The personal pain of my family's betrayal would have to wait. Right now, I had a job to do and a career to salvage. What I didn't know was that Maya's photographs had captured more than just my service weapon and tactical gear. Hidden in the background of one of her pictures was a case file I had been reviewing at home, a case file containing classified information about a domestic terrorism investigation that had been months in the making. And that file was about to lead me into the most dangerous case of my career, one that would reveal corruption within the very organization I had sworn to serve. The Chicago ATF field office at midnight was a different world from the elegant ballroom I had left behind. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across empty desks and silent computers. The building smelled of stale coffee and the industrial disinfectant used by the overnight cleaning crew. This was my real environment,
the place where I belonged, far from the complicated dynamics of family expectations and social pretenses. Special Agent in Charge Rebecca Torres was waiting for me in Conference Room B, her silver hair pulled back in its usual nonsense bun, her dark eyes sharp despite the late hour. She had built her career by being tougher than everyone around her, and at 52, she commanded respect from agents half her age through sheer competence and unwavering integrity. Seeing her sitting across from stacks of files and photographs made my stomach clench with anxiety. "Sit down, Reyes," she said without looking up from the documents spread across the table. Maya's photographs were arranged in a precise grid on the conference table. Someone had enhanced and enlarged them, revealing details that I hadn't noticed in the chaos of the wedding reception. My service weapon was clearly visible, along with my tactical vest, night vision equipment, and several case files that should never have been photographed. Torres picked up one of the enhanced images and slid it across the table to me. "Tell me about this file." She pointed to a manila folder visible in the background of Maya's photograph.
My blood ran cold as I recognized the distinctive red classification marking along the edge of the folder. It was the Bridgewater file, an investigation into a domestic terrorism cell that had been planning attacks on federal buildings throughout the Midwest. The case was so sensitive that only 6 agents had access to the full intelligence picture, and I was the lead undercover operative gathering evidence from inside the organization. "That's classified material related to Operation Bridgewater," I admitted, my voice steady despite the growing panic in my chest. "It shouldn't have been visible, but I was reviewing case notes at home when my sister broke into my apartment." Torres leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "The file contains the real names and locations of our assets within the Bridgewater organization. If this information becomes public, 3 undercover agents and at least a dozen civilian informants will be at immediate risk of assassination." The weight of that reality settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. My sister's misguided attempt to protect me had potentially signed death warrants for innocent people who were risking their lives to prevent terrorist attacks. The irony was devastating. "Ma'am," I said carefully, "what's our exposure level? How many people could have seen the details in that photograph?" Torres pulled out her tablet and showed me a social media monitoring report that made my heart sink. 17 people posted about the incident on various platforms within the first hour, most focused on the family drama, but 3 posts included clear images of your equipment. One of those images shows enough detail of the file folder to potentially identify the classification level. She swiped to another screen showing a network analysis diagram. Our cyber intelligence unit tracked the propagation of the images. They've been shared, screenshotted, and reposted across multiple platforms. The digital footprint is already beyond our ability to contain through normal channels. I stared at the web of connections spreading across her tablet screen, each node representing another potential security breach. What are our options? Officially, we implement damage control protocols, pull our assets out of the field, and restart the investigation from scratch. That sets us back 8 months and gives the Bridgewater cell time to complete whatever they're planning. Torres paused, studying my face. Unofficially, we have one other option. She opened a new file and spread its contents across the table. Surveillance photographs, financial records, phone intercepts, and personnel files created a mosaic of information that took me several moments to process. When the pattern became clear, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. "Agent Marcus Webb," Torres said, pointing to a photograph of a man I recognized from the federal building. 15-year veteran, stellar record, commendations for valor. Also, according to our investigation, a paid asset of the Bridgewater organization. Webb worked in our intelligence analysis division, which meant he had access to every piece of information flowing through the Chicago field office. If he was feeding intelligence to domestic terrorists, the security breach went far deeper than Maya's accidental photography. "How long have you suspected him?" I asked, studying Webb's personnel file. 6 weeks. We've been building a case, but it's been slow going because we couldn't risk exposing our investigation to anyone who might warn him. Torres met my eyes. "Tonight's incident changes the timeline. If Webb realizes that the Bridgewater file was compromised at your sister's wedding, he might panic and run. The implications hit me like a physical blow. You think he was monitoring social media about the incident? We know he was. Our surveillance team tracked his online activity throughout the evening. He accessed multiple posts about your situation and downloaded several images, including the one showing the classified file. Torres leaned forward. Webb doesn't know that we've identified him as a mole, but he knows that sensitive information was potentially exposed tonight. A cold understanding settled over me. You want me to contact him, make him think I'm panicking about the security breach. More than that, we want you to offer to trade information in exchange for protection. Torres pulled out another file, this one containing financial records and travel documents. Webb has been preparing an exit strategy for months. Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, a false passport, airline reservations for next week. He's already planning to run. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would approach Webb as a panicked agent whose cover had been blown, offering to share intelligence about ongoing ATF operations in exchange for safe passage out of the country. If Webb was truly working for the Bridgewater organization, he would see me as either a valuable asset or a dangerous liability. Either way, his response would give us the evidence we needed to arrest him. What about the real security breach? The agents and informants who are actually at risk because of tonight? Already handled. We pulled everyone out 2 hours ago and implemented emergency relocation protocols. As far as the Bridgewater cell knows, the operation was shut down due to budget cuts. Torres gathered the photographs into a neat stack. The only person who doesn't know about the evacuation is Webb. I spent the next 3 hours preparing for what could be the most dangerous undercover operation of my career. Unlike my previous assignments infiltrating criminal organizations, this time I would be deceiving a fellow federal agent, someone who knew how investigations worked and would be looking for signs of deception. The approach had to be perfect. Too eager, and Webb would suspect a trap. Too casual, and he might not believe I was genuinely desperate. I needed to present myself as an agent whose career was destroyed, whose family relationships were ruined, and whose only option was to disappear completely. At dawn, I sat in my car outside Webb's suburban home in Oak Park, watching him load suitcases into a sedan through the gray morning light. He was already running, just as Torres had predicted. But he hadn't left yet, which meant we still had a chance to stop him and uncover the full extent of his betrayal. My phone buzzed with the text from Torres. Green light. Make contact. I took a deep breath and dialed Webb's number, preparing to deliver the performance of my life. When he answered, his voice was tense and guarded. Marcus, it's Sofia Reyes, I said, letting exhaustion and desperation color my words. I need your help. Something happened last night that's going to destroy everything. There was a long pause before he responded.
Sophia, I heard about the incident at the wedding. Are you okay? No, I'm not okay. Marcus, I'm blown. My cover is completely compromised, and there's classified material in those photographs my sister took. If this gets out, people are going to die, and I'm going to prison. Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear him calculating, weighing the risks and opportunities my call presented. Where are you? He asked finally. Driving around, trying to figure out what to do. Marcus, I know this sounds crazy, but I need to disappear. I need to get out of the country before this whole thing explodes. I paused, letting the silence stretch. I have information that certain people might find valuable. Information that could buy me safe passage. When Webb finally spoke again, his voice had changed. The concern was gone, replaced by something colder and more calculating. Meet me at the Lincoln Park Zoo in 1 hour, he said, by the Lions exhibit. Come alone. As I drove toward what could be my final operation, I thought about Maya sleeping peacefully in her pristine apartment, probably still believing that her worst crime was embarrassing the family at a wedding. She had no idea that her photographs had uncovered a conspiracy that threatened national security, or that her sister was about to risk everything to bring a traitor to justice.
The morning sun was breaking through the Chicago skyline as I pulled into the zoo parking lot, preparing to face a man who had betrayed everything we had sworn to protect. In a few hours, either Webb would be in custody or I would be dead. But for the first time since Maya's devastating revelation, I felt like myself again. Not the disappointing daughter or the underachieving sister, but Special Agent Sofia Reyes, doing the job I was born to do. The real battle was just beginning. The Lincoln Park Zoo at 8 in the morning was almost deserted, except for joggers and early dog walkers. The autumn air carried the distant sounds of the city waking up, but inside the zoo grounds, everything felt suspended in an eerie calm. I walked slowly toward the lions exhibit, my earpiece crackling with barely audible updates from the surveillance team Torres had positioned around the perimeter. Agent Webb was already there when I arrived, standing with his back to the lion enclosure, his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. He looked older than I remembered, stress lines etched around his eyes, his usually pristine appearance slightly disheveled. When he saw me approaching, he glanced around nervously before stepping closer. "Sophia," he said quietly, "you look terrible." I had deliberately chosen to look the part of an agent whose world was falling apart. No makeup, rumpled clothes from the night before, exhaustion written across my face. "I haven't slept. Marcus, this situation is spiraling completely out of control." He studied my face carefully, and I could see him weighing my words, looking for signs of deception. "Tell me exactly what happened at the wedding." I launched into a carefully rehearsed account that mixed truth with calculated lies. I described Maya's discovery of my equipment, her dramatic revelation at the reception, the police response, and the devastating exposure of my federal identity. But I also added fabricated details about additional classified materials she had photographed, fictional conversations with supervisors who were supposedly threatening criminal charges, and imaginary evidence that could implicate other agents. "The worst part," I said, letting my voice crack with genuine emotion, "is that there are files in those photographs that could expose ongoing operations, not just mine, but other cases too. If the wrong people get access to this information, agents are going to die." Webb's expression shifted slightly, and I caught a flicker of something that might have been satisfaction. "What kind of operations?" "The Bridgewater investigation, for one. My system managed to photograph case files that contain asset identities and operational details." I paused, watching his reaction carefully. "If that information reaches the wrong hands, it could compromise months of work and put a dozen undercover operatives at risk." There it was, the slight tightening around his eyes, the almost imperceptible lean forward. Webb was interested, very interested in the Bridgewater information. In my earpiece, I could hear Agent Rodriguez from the surveillance team confirming that they had captured Webb's reaction on telephoto cameras. "Sophia," Webb said slowly, "you're talking about extremely sensitive intelligence. If you're thinking about trading that information to protect yourself, you need to be very careful about who you approach." I looked around nervously, playing the part of an agent who was in over her head. "I don't know who else to trust. Marcus, you've been doing this longer than anyone. You know how these things work. If I'm going to survive this, I need to make a deal with someone who has the power to make my problems disappear." Webb was silent for a long moment, staring at the lions pacing behind the glass barrier. When he finally spoke again, his voice had taken on a different quality, more businesslike and calculating. "There might be people who would be interested in that kind of information. People who could offer you protection in exchange for intelligence about federal operations." My heart raced, but I forced myself to maintain the desperate, confused facade. "What kind of people?" "The kind who operate outside traditional law enforcement channels. The kind who have resources and connections that could help someone disappear completely." Webb glanced around again, then stepped closer. "But Sophia, once you go down that path, there's no coming back. You'd be burning every bridge, betraying everything you've sworn to protect." I let tears well up in my eyes, channeling the genuine emotional devastation I felt about my family situation into this performance. I don't have a choice anymore, Marcus. My career is over, my family hates me, and if I stay here, I'm either going to prison or ending up dead when those terrorists figure out what was exposed. Webb reached into his jacket and pulled out a burner phone, holding it out to me. There's a contact in this phone, someone who might be able to help you. But Sofia, you need to understand what you're getting into. These people don't operate by federal regulations or constitutional protections. They have their own rules, their own justice system. I took the phone with trembling hands, staring at the device that would connect me directly to the Bridgewater terrorist network. What do I tell them? Tell them Marcus sent you.
Tell them you have intelligence about federal counterterrorism operations and you need safe passage out of the country. Webb's voice dropped to a whisper. But Sofia, once you make that call, there's no protection I can offer you. You'll be completely on your own. The weight of the moment settled over me. Webb had just handed me direct access to domestic terrorists, confirming everything Torres had suspected about his betrayal. But he had also revealed something else, something that chilled me to the bone. He wasn't just passing information to these people, he was actively recruiting federal agents to defect. How many others? I asked quietly. How many other agents have you helped disappear? Webb's expression hardened, and for a moment I thought I had pushed too far. Then he smiled, a cold expression that transformed his familiar face into something predatory and alien. Enough, he said simply. The federal government has failed, Sofia. The bureaucracy, the politics, the restrictions that prevent us from doing what's necessary to protect this country. There are people working outside the system who understand what real security requires. I listened in horror as Webb outlined his philosophy of betrayal, disguising treason as patriotism and presenting domestic terrorism as necessary reform. He spoke about federal agents who had grown disillusioned with government oversight, operatives who had been recruited to provide intelligence to organizations that could act without constitutional constraints. The Bridgewater Group isn't what the media portrays, Webb continued. They're patriots who understand that sometimes you have to destroy a corrupt system to rebuild it properly. They're preparing for a new kind of warfare, one where traditional law enforcement will be obsolete. In my earpiece, I could hear Torres coordinating the arrest teams that were closing in on our location. But Webb wasn't finished with his recruitment pitch. You have skills, Sofia, training that could be valuable to the right people. Instead of rotting in prison or hiding for the rest of your life, you could be part of something important, something that will reshape American law enforcement from the ground up. The burner phone felt heavy in my hands as I realized the full scope of Webb's operation. He wasn't just selling intelligence, he was actively corrupting federal agents, turning them against their own agencies and recruiting them for domestic terrorist organizations. What about the oath we took? I asked, genuinely curious about how he justified his betrayal. What about protecting and defending the Constitution? Webb laughed, a bitter sound that echoed off the zoo's concrete pathways. The Constitution is a document written by slave owners 200 years ago. It's not sacred scripture, Sofia. It's an outdated framework that prevents us from doing what's necessary in the modern world. His words triggered something deep in my core, a fury that had nothing to do with the undercover operation and everything to do with the values that had shaped my entire adult life. I thought about the agents who had died protecting constitutional principles, the sacrifices made by countless law enforcement officers who believed in the system Webb was so casually dismissing. You're right about one thing, Marcus, I said, my voice steady and clear. The system isn't perfect, but that doesn't justify betraying everything we've sworn to protect. Webb's expression shifted as he caught the change in my tone. Sofia, what are you saying? I'm saying that Special Agent Sofia Reyes doesn't make deals with terrorists. I stepped back, speaking clearly for the recording devices that were capturing every word. And neither do real federal agents. The color drained from Webb's face as he realized what was happening. He spun around looking for escape routes, but ATF tactical teams were already emerging from concealed positions throughout the zoo. Red laser dots appeared on his chest as snipers acquired their target. Marcus Webb,
I announced, raising my voice so the arrest teams could hear. "You're under arrest for treason, conspiracy to commit domestic terrorism, and violation of your oath as a federal law enforcement officer." Webb's shoulders sagged in defeat as the tactical team surrounded him. As Agent Rodriguez read him his Miranda rights, Webb looked at me with something that might have been respect mixed with profound disappointment. "You were always the best of us, Sofia," he said quietly, as the handcuffs clicked into place. "I genuinely hoped you would choose differently." "So did I," replied, watching as they led him away. "I hoped you would remember what it means to be a federal agent." Later that afternoon, I sat in Torres's office while she debriefed the operation and outlined the intelligence Webb's arrest had provided. The burner phone contained contacts for 3 domestic terrorist cells, financial records showing payments to corrupt federal employees, and communication logs that would lead to dozens of additional arrests. "The Bridgewater organization is finished," Torres reported. "Webb's cooperation has given us everything we need to dismantle their entire network. The threat they pose to federal facilities has been eliminated." I nodded, feeling the exhaustion of the past 24 hours settling into my bones. "What happens to my cover? Can I go back to undercover work?" Torres was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "Your federal identity is completely blown, Reyes. Every criminal organization in the country will know your face and name within a week. But there are other kinds of assignments, other ways to serve." She opened a new file and slid it across her desk. "The Justice Department is creating a new unit focused on corruption within federal law enforcement. They need agents with your experience and integrity to investigate cases like Webb's." I looked at the assignment details, realizing that my sister's dramatic revelation had inadvertently led me to exactly where I needed to be. Internal affairs for federal agencies? More than that, Sofia. You'd be hunting traitors, people who've betrayed their oaths and endangered national security for personal gain. Torres met my eyes. "It's not glamorous work, and it won't make you popular with other agents, but it's necessary." As I drove home that evening, I thought about the strange journey that had brought me to this moment. Maya's attempt to expose what she thought were illegal weapons accidentally uncovered a real conspiracy that threatened national security. Her violation of my privacy led to the arrest of a domestic terrorist recruiter and potentially saved dozens of lives. When I arrived at my apartment building, I found Maya sitting on the front steps, still wearing her dress from the wedding reception. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes and an expression of profound regret. "I've been waiting for you. I needed to apologize properly, and I needed to understand what I've done." I sat down beside her on the concrete steps, feeling the weight of everything that had happened between us.
Maya, what you did last night led to the arrest of a federal agent who was working with domestic terrorists. Your photographs helped us uncover a conspiracy that could have resulted in attacks on federal buildings. She stared at me in shock. "What do you mean?" I told her everything I could about Webb's betrayal, about the terrorist recruitment network, about the lives that had been saved because her dramatic revelation had forced the investigation into the open. As I spoke, I watched her process the reality that her misguided attempt to protect me had accidentally protected countless others. "So I didn't ruin your career?" she asked hopefully. "You ended one career and started another," I replied honestly. "I can't do undercover work anymore, but I can do something else, something that might be even more important." Maya was quiet for a long time, absorbing the complexity of what had transpired. Finally, she looked at me with something approaching understanding. "I still don't know who you really are," she admitted, "but I'm starting to realize that maybe that's okay. Maybe some people are meant to do things that their families can't fully understand." As we sat together in the gathering darkness, I realized that Maya's words captured something essential about the life I had chosen. My family might never fully comprehend the work I did or the sacrifices it required, but they could learn to trust that it mattered. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. 6 months after the wedding that changed everything, I stood in the gleaming corridors of the Dirksen Federal Building in downtown Chicago, my new badge identifying me as a senior special agent with the Department of Justice's Internal Corruption Task Force. The weight of the badge felt different from my old ATF credentials, heavier somehow, carrying the responsibility of policing the very people I had once called colleagues.
The irony wasn't lost on me that Maya's catastrophic attempt to expose what she thought was my criminal activity had led me to a career exposing actual criminal activity within federal law enforcement. My office on the 14th floor overlooked Lake Michigan, and on clear days like this one, I could see all the way to the horizon where the water met the sky in a perfect blue line. The view was a stark contrast to the windowless conference rooms and underground bunkers where I had spent most of my undercover career. Everything about this new position was different, from the business suits I now wore instead of tactical gear to the complex financial investigations that had replaced the adrenaline-fueled operations of my previous life. The Webb case had been just the beginning. His arrest had opened a door into a labyrinthian network of corruption that extended far beyond Chicago, reaching into federal agencies across the country. In the 6 months since his capture, our task force had identified 17 additional federal employees who were selling classified information to various criminal organizations. The scope of the betrayal was staggering, and each new arrest revealed additional layers of conspiracy that seemed to stretch endlessly into the shadows of federal law enforcement. My first major assignment as part of the corruption task force had taken me to Miami, where a DEA supervisor was suspected of providing advanced warning to drug cartels about upcoming raids. The investigation required all the skills I had developed during my undercover years, with a crucial difference. Instead of infiltrating criminal organizations, I was now investigating the people who were supposed to be fighting those same organizations. The moral complexity of the work was exhausting in ways that chasing terrorists had never been. Agent Sarah Chen, my new partner, knocked on my office door and entered without waiting for permission. She was a former FBI financial crimes specialist who had joined the task force after uncovering embezzlement within her own field office. Like me, she had discovered that fighting corruption within federal agencies required a different kind of courage than traditional law enforcement work. "We've got another one," Chen said, dropping a thick file on my desk. "Agent David Morrison, U.S. Marshals Service, Denver District. He's been providing witness protection locations to organized crime families in exchange for cryptocurrency payments." I opened the file and began reviewing Morrison's personnel record. 15 years of exemplary service, multiple commendations, a spotless record that made him the last person anyone would suspect of betrayal. The pattern was becoming depressingly familiar. The most effective corrupt agents were often the ones who had built reputations for integrity over decades of service. "What's our timeline?" I asked, studying surveillance photographs that showed Morrison meeting with known associates of the Torino crime family. "The U.S. Attorney wants arrests within 2 weeks. 3 protected witnesses have already been murdered, and there are indications that Morrison is planning to disappear. He's been liquidating assets and has purchased airline tickets to a non-extradition country." As Chen outlined the operational details, my mind drifted to the conversation I had with Maya the previous evening. She had called to tell me about her new job with a non-profit organization that provided legal services to immigrant families. The work paid less than half what she had earned in corporate marketing, but she said it felt meaningful in a way her previous career never had. "I've been thinking about what you said," Maya had told me during our phone call, about how some people are meant to do things their families can't fully understand. I think I'm finally starting to understand what that means. Maya's transformation had been as dramatic as my career change. The guilt she felt about her role in exposing my federal identity had motivated her to completely reevaluate her priorities. She had quit her high-paying marketing job and enrolled in law school with the goal of becoming an immigration attorney. Our parents were as confused by Maya's career change as they had been about my federal law enforcement work, but they were beginning to accept that both their daughters had chosen paths that prioritized service over conventional success. The Morrison investigation would require me to travel to Denver and spend several weeks building a case that could withstand the scrutiny of federal prosecutors. Unlike my previous undercover work, where success was measured by preventing immediate threats, corruption investigations required meticulous documentation and irrefutable evidence. The standards were higher because the defendants understood the legal system and had resources to mount sophisticated defenses. Chen and I spent the rest of the morning reviewing financial records that traced Morrison's cryptocurrency transactions. The digital trail was complex, but clear. showing regular payments that corresponded exactly with the dates that protected witnesses had been compromised. The technical evidence was solid, but we needed to establish Morrison's direct involvement in providing the information. "We'll need to set up a controlled operation," I told Chen. "Create a fictional witness protection case and see if Morrison attempts to sell the location information." Chen nodded, already pulling up the protocols for establishing fake witness identities. "I'll coordinate with the Denver field office. We'll need local support for surveillance and technical operations." The irony of using federal resources to investigate federal agents wasn't lost on me. Every operation required careful compartmentalization to ensure that corrupt agents within the supporting agencies couldn't compromise our investigations. The task force operated under strict security protocols that assumed every federal agency had been penetrated to some degree. As Chen left to begin coordination with Denver, I turned my attention to the stack of case files that had accumulated on my desk. Each folder represented a federal agent who had betrayed their oath and endangered the lives of the people they were supposed to protect. The scope of the corruption was overwhelming, but it was also motivating. Every arrest we made potentially saved lives and restored some measure of integrity to federal law enforcement. My secure phone rang, displaying a number I recognized as belonging to Assistant Director Patricia Vance, the Justice Department official who oversaw our task force. Vance was a legend in federal law enforcement, a former federal prosecutor who had built her career fighting organized crime and public corruption. She was also one of the few people in government who fully understood the scope of the corruption problem we were confronting. "Rez," Vance said without preamble, "I need you in Washington immediately. We've got a situation that requires your specific expertise." I glanced at my calendar, mentally rearranging the Morrison preparation timeline. "What kind of situation?" "The kind that involves your former colleague, Marcus Webb."
"He's decided to cooperate fully with our investigation, and he's provided information that's going to require immediate action." The mention of Webb's name sent a chill through me. Since his arrest at the Lincoln Park Zoo, he had been held in federal custody while prosecutors built their case. His trial was scheduled to begin in 3 months, and until now, he had refused all cooperation offers. If he was suddenly willing to talk, it meant he had information valuable enough to negotiate a reduced sentence. "What kind of information?" I asked, already reaching for my travel bag. "The kind that suggests the corruption problem is significantly larger than we previously understood. Webb claims he can identify corrupt agents in 12 different federal agencies, including some at very senior levels." Vance paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. "He specifically requested to speak with you, Reyes. He says you're the only agent he trusts to handle the information properly." The request struck me as strange, given that I was the agent who had orchestrated Webb's arrest. But I had learned that corruption cases often involved complex psychological dynamics that defied conventional logic. Webb might see me as the only person who had treated him honestly, even while working to destroy him. "When do you need me there?" I asked. "There's a Justice Department plane waiting for you at Midway. We'll debrief you during the flight." 3 hours later, I was sitting in a secure conference room in the J. Edgar Hoover building, waiting for Marcus Webb to be brought up from the detention facility. The room was stark and sterile, designed to prevent any form of electronic surveillance or communication. Assistant Director Vance sat across from me, along with 2 federal prosecutors and a stenographer who would record every word of Webb's statement. "Before we bring him in," Vance said, "you need to understand what we're dealing with. Webb has provided preliminary information about what he calls the network, a loose confederation of corrupt federal agents who share intelligence and coordinate their criminal activities. According to Webb, this isn't just individual agents selling information for personal gain. It's an organized conspiracy that spans multiple agencies and includes agents at the supervisory level." The implications of such a network were staggering. If Webb was telling the truth, it meant that federal law enforcement agencies had been systematically compromised for years, possibly decades.
The damage to ongoing investigations and the danger to undercover operatives and informants would be incalculable. Why is he talking now? I asked. His attorney says Webb realized that his original plan to disappear was never going to work. The network he helped create would eventually eliminate him as a security risk. Cooperation with us is his only chance of survival. When Webb was brought into the room, I was shocked by his appearance. The confident, well-groomed agent I had known had been replaced by a gaunt, hollow-eyed man who looked as if he hadn't slept in months. Prison had not been kind to him, but more than that, he seemed to be carrying the weight of knowledge that was destroying him from within. "Hello, Sofia," he said quietly, taking the seat across from me. "Thank you for coming." I studied his face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. "Marcus, I'm here because Assistant Director Vance says you have information about corruption within federal agencies. If you're looking for sympathy or forgiveness, you're talking to the wrong person." Webb nodded, seeming to appreciate my directness. "I'm not looking for forgiveness. I'm looking for a way to stop what I helped create before it destroys everything we once believed in." Over the next 4 hours, Webb provided the most comprehensive briefing on federal corruption that anyone in law enforcement had ever received. He outlined a network of agents across 12 agencies who had been recruited over a period of 15 years. The recruitment process was sophisticated and methodical, targeting agents who were facing financial difficulties, personal crises, or professional disappointments. "It started small," Webb explained, his voice barely above a whisper. "A few agents sharing information with organized crime families in exchange for money. But it evolved into something much more dangerous. The network began coordinating its activities, sharing intelligence about investigations that threatened multiple criminal organizations. The scope of the conspiracy was breathtaking. Webb described federal agents who had warned drug cartels about upcoming raids, FBI personnel who had provided witness protection information to organized crime families, DEA supervisors who had sabotaged investigations into major trafficking operations, and ATF agents who had allowed illegal weapon shipments to proceed uninterrupted. The Bridgewater domestic terrorism investigation was just one example. The network has provided intelligence to terrorist organizations, foreign intelligence services, and criminal syndicates. We've compromised national security investigations, endangered undercover operatives, and facilitated attacks that cost American lives. As Webb spoke, I felt a growing sense of horror at the scale of the betrayal he was describing. The corruption wasn't limited to individual agents making isolated decisions to sell information. It was a systematic subversion of federal law enforcement that had been operating for years under the radar of internal security measures. "How many agents are we talking about?" Vance asked. "At least 200 that I know of directly," Webb replied. "But the network operates in cells, so the total number could be much higher. Each agent typically only knows a few others in their immediate cell, which provides security against exactly this kind of comprehensive exposure." The prosecutors began asking detailed questions about specific cases and individuals, building the foundation for what would become the largest corruption investigation in federal law enforcement history. Webb answered every question with mechanical precision, providing names, dates, financial details, and operational specifics that would take months to verify and investigate. "There's something else," Webb said, as the formal questioning concluded. "Something that directly relates to you, Sofia." I felt a chill of apprehension. "What do you mean?" "Your sister's photographs at the wedding? The ones that exposed your federal identity and led to my arrest? The network knows about those photographs, and they know about your new position with the Corruption Task Force." Webb leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Sofia, you're not just investigating corruption anymore. You've become a target." Vance immediately activated security protocols, assigning protective details and implementing enhanced counter-surveillance measures. But Webb wasn't finished with his revelations. "The network has been tracking your activities since the wedding incident. They know about the Morrison investigation in Denver. They know about the other cases your task force is working, and they're planning to eliminate you before you can cause further damage to their operations." The room fell silent as the implications of Webb's warning sank in. I had spent my career hunting dangerous criminals, but I had always known who my enemies were. Now I was being told that my enemies included federal agents who had access to the same resources and intelligence that I did. "Who specifically is involved in this threat against me?" I asked. Webb hesitated for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper.
These are the names of network agents who've been assigned to eliminate you. Some of them are people you've worked with, people you trust. I unfolded the paper and read the names, feeling my blood turn to ice. The list included agents from the ATF, FBI, DEA, and U.S. Marshals Service. 3 of the names belonged to agents I had worked with directly during my undercover career, people I had considered friends and colleagues. "When?" Vance asked. "Soon," Webb replied. "The network is accelerating their timeline because they know I'm cooperating. They can't afford to let your task force continue operating." As we left the Hoover building under heavy security escort, I realized that my career had taken another dramatic turn. I was no longer just investigating corruption. I was fighting for my life against a conspiracy that included some of the most dangerous and well-trained individuals in federal law enforcement. The next several weeks were a blur of safe houses, encrypted communications, and carefully orchestrated operations designed to gather evidence against network members while protecting the task force personnel who were investigating them. The Morrison case in Denver was put on hold while we focused on the more immediate threat posed by the conspiracy Webb had exposed. Chen and I worked from a secure facility outside Washington, coordinating with trusted agents from multiple agencies to build cases against network members. The investigation required unprecedented security measures, including polygraph examinations for all personnel involved and comprehensive background investigations that went back decades. "We've confirmed 12 of the names Webb provided," Chen reported during one of our daily briefings. "Financial records show payments consistent with his descriptions, and surveillance has documented meetings between suspected network members and known criminal associates." The evidence was mounting, but so was the danger. 2 attempts had been made on my life during the past month, both thwarted by the protective detail assigned by the Justice Department. The first involved a sniper positioned outside a restaurant where I was meeting with prosecutors. The second was a car bomb planted in the parking garage of my hotel. Both attacks were carried out with the precision and sophistication that only federal agents would possess. "They're getting desperate," Vance observed during one of our secure video conferences. "The network is beginning to collapse, and they're willing to risk exposure to eliminate the people who are destroying them." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Maya called me on my secure phone, her voice tight with anxiety. "Sofia, something strange is happening. There are people watching my apartment, following me to work, asking questions about you." She paused, and I could hear traffic noise in the background. "I think I'm being targeted because of our relationship." My heart sank as I realized that the network was expanding their threat beyond me to include my family members. Maya had already suffered enough because of her involvement in my federal career, and now she was being endangered by people who wanted to use her as leverage against me. "Maya, where are you right now?" I asked. "I'm at the law school library. I've been staying here late every night because I'm afraid to go home." I immediately contacted the protective detail supervisor and arranged for Maya to be brought to the secure facility where Chen and I were working. When she arrived 3 hours later, escorted by federal marshals, she looked exhausted and terrified. "I'm sorry," she said as soon as she saw me. "I'm sorry for getting involved in your life again. I seem to keep making things worse for you." I pulled my sister into a hug, feeling the weight of everything we had both endured over the past year. "Maya, none of this is your fault. You're being targeted by people who have betrayed everything they swore to protect." Over the next several days, Maya stayed at the secure facility while we worked to dismantle the network. Her presence there actually helped our investigation, as several network members attempted to use her as a way to locate me.
We were able to trace their surveillance efforts and identify additional conspirators who hadn't appeared on Webb's original list. The final confrontation came sooner than anyone expected. Intelligence intercepts revealed that the network was planning a coordinated attack on the secure facility using inside information provided by a corrupt marshal who had access to our security protocols. Rather than wait for the attack, Vance decided to launch simultaneous raids on network members across the country. "This is it," she announced during our final briefing. "We're going to arrest every network member we've identified all at the same time before they can warn each other or destroy evidence." The operation, codenamed Clean House, involved over 300 federal agents from agencies that had been certified as clean of network infiltration. Raids were conducted simultaneously in 15 cities, targeting network members in their homes, offices, and safe houses. I participated in the arrest of Agent Sarah Kellerman, a DEA supervisor who had been providing intelligence to Mexican drug cartels for over 8 years. The arrest was taking place at her suburban home in Virginia, and when we showed her the financial evidence of her betrayal, she collapsed into tears and immediately asked for an attorney. "I never meant for it to go this far," she sobbed as the handcuffs were applied. "It started with just one payment, just one time to help with my daughter's medical bills. But then they owned me and I couldn't get out." Kellerman's reaction was typical of many network members. Most of them hadn't started their careers intending to become traitors. They had been gradually corrupted through a combination of financial pressure, personal crises, and the psychological manipulation of their network handlers. By the end of the day, we had arrested 47 federal agents and support personnel across the country. The scope of the operation made national headlines, sending shockwaves through federal law enforcement agencies and raising serious questions about internal security procedures. Webb's cooperation had been invaluable, but it came at a personal cost that was evident when I visited him in federal prison several weeks after the raids. He looked older and more broken than ever, the weight of his betrayal and the destruction of his former colleagues clearly taking a toll on his mental health. "Do you think it was worth it?" he asked me during our conversation. "Destroying all those careers, ruining all those lives?" I considered his question carefully before responding. "Marcus, those people destroyed their own careers when they chose to betray their oaths. What you helped us do was prevent them from destroying even more lives through their continued criminal activities." Webb nodded slowly, but I could see that he would spend the rest of his life wrestling with the consequences of both his original betrayal and his ultimate cooperation. The network investigation fundamentally changed federal law enforcement in ways that are still being felt today. New security protocols were implemented to prevent the kind of systematic corruption that had flourished for years. Enhanced background investigations, regular polygraph examinations, and improved financial monitoring systems were put in place to identify potential security risks before they could be exploited. My role in exposing and dismantling the network led to a promotion to Deputy Assistant Director of the Internal Corruption Task Force, making me one of the youngest people ever to hold such a senior position in federal law enforcement. The promotion came with increased responsibilities and even greater security concerns, as the criminal organizations that had relied on network intelligence were now actively seeking revenge. Maya graduated from law school with honors and passed the Illinois bar examination on her first attempt. She accepted a position with the same nonprofit organization where she had been working while attending school, focusing on immigration law and civil rights cases. Our relationship had been strengthened by the shared trauma of the network investigation, and we now spoke regularly about the challenges of choosing careers that prioritized service over personal safety. "I finally understand what you meant about some people being called to do difficult things," Maya told me during one of our weekly phone calls. "It's not about being a hero or seeking glory. It's about doing what needs to be done, even when it's dangerous or thankless." Our parents had gradually come to terms with both our daughters' career choices, though they still worried constantly about our safety.
My father had installed a sophisticated security system in their home after learning about the network's targeting of family members, and my mother had taken self-defense classes despite being nearly 60 years old. "I'm proud of both of you," my mother told me during a rare family dinner at a restaurant chosen for its security features. I don't always understand what you do, but I can see that it matters. The network investigation had taken almost 2 years to complete, from Webb's initial cooperation to the final convictions of the last conspirators. During that time, I had learned that fighting corruption within law enforcement required a different kind of courage than traditional police work. It meant accepting that some of the people you trusted most could be the ones trying to destroy you. It meant living with the constant uncertainty of not knowing who was truly on your side. But it also meant being part of something larger than any individual case or investigation. The destruction of the network had restored faith in federal law enforcement and demonstrated that the system could police itself when necessary. The hundreds of agents who had participated in Clean House had shown that integrity and honor still existed within federal agencies, even when they were being systematically attacked from within. As I sat in my office overlooking Lake Michigan, reviewing the files for new corruption investigations that seemed to appear daily, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me to this point. Maya's dramatic revelation at Isabella's wedding had set in motion a chain of events that had fundamentally changed both our lives and the entire structure of federal law enforcement. The work was far from over. New corruption cases emerged regularly, and the criminal organizations that had lost their network contacts were actively working to recruit new federal assets. But the security measures and investigation protocols developed during the network case had made systematic corruption much more difficult to establish and maintain. Chen knocked on my office door and entered with another stack of case files. 3 new corruption referrals from the FBI, 2 from the DEA, and 1 from Homeland Security, she announced, dropping the files on my desk. I looked at the files, each one representing another federal agent who had chosen personal gain over public service, and felt the familiar mixture of disappointment and determination that had become the defining emotion of my career. The work was difficult and often depressing, but it was necessary. Every corrupt agent we identified and arrested was a potential threat neutralized, a crack in the system repaired. Any patterns emerging? I asked Chen. Actually, yes. All 6 cases involve agents who are experiencing financial difficulties related to medical expenses for family members. It's the same vulnerability that the network exploited for years. The pattern suggested that our adversaries were learning from the network's destruction and adapting their recruitment strategies accordingly. Instead of building large conspiracies, they were focusing on individual agents facing specific types of personal crises. We need to develop proactive intervention protocols, I told Chen. Instead of just investigating corruption after it occurs, we need to identify agents who are vulnerable to recruitment and provide them with support before they make the wrong choice. Chen nodded, already taking notes for the policy recommendations we would present to senior leadership. The evolution from reactive investigation to proactive prevention represented the next phase in our ongoing battle against federal corruption. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself thinking about the conversation I had with Webb during my last visit to his federal prison. He had asked whether destroying the network had been worth the cost in ruined lives and broken careers. The question had haunted me for months, but I was finally beginning to formulate an answer. The network agents hadn't been evil people who set out to betray their country. Most of them were good agents who had made one bad decision during a moment of weakness, then found themselves trapped in a web of criminal activity they couldn't escape. Their downfall was tragic, but it was also necessary to prevent the continuation of systematic betrayal that was undermining the entire federal law enforcement system. The real tragedy wasn't that corrupt agents had been arrested and prosecuted. The real tragedy was that they had been allowed to operate undetected for so many years, compromising investigations and endangering lives while their colleagues trusted them completely. The network investigation had been painful but necessary surgery to remove a cancer that was slowly destroying federal law enforcement from within. My secure phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed Assistant Director Vance's direct number. "Reyes," Vance said, "I need you to prepare for international travel. We've received intelligence that several former network members who fled the country before Clean House are attempting to establish a similar corruption network in cooperation with foreign intelligence services." I felt a familiar surge of adrenaline at the prospect of a new challenge. "Where are we going?" "London initially, then possibly Eastern Europe."
The British authorities have identified at least 3 former federal agents who were offering to sell U.S. intelligence to the highest bidder. They want our help in developing a joint operation to neutralize the threat. As I began preparing for what would be my first international corruption investigation, I realized that the battle against federal betrayal was evolving beyond domestic law enforcement into the realm of international counterintelligence. The skills I had developed as an undercover agent and corruption investigator would be tested in a new arena. Maya called that evening as I was packing for the London trip. "I saw the news about your promotion. Deputy Assistant Director. That sounds very important and very dangerous." "It's both," I admitted, "but it's also the job I was meant to do. Everything that has happened, from the wedding disaster to the network investigation, has led me to this point." Maya was quiet for a moment, processing the implications of my new responsibilities. "Will you be traveling more? Will you be in more danger?" "Probably," I said honestly. "But Maya, I want you to know that none of this would have been possible without what you did at Isabella's wedding. Your attempt to expose what you thought was my criminal activity ended up exposing actual criminal activity that was threatening national security." "I'm still sorry about violating your privacy and causing such a scene," Maya said softly. "Don't be sorry," I replied. "Sometimes the right thing happens for the wrong reasons, and sometimes people do exactly what they're supposed to do, even when they don't realize it at the time." As I finished packing for London, I reflected on the journey that had brought me from a blown undercover agent whose sister had accidentally exposed her federal identity to a senior corruption investigator whose work was helping to reform federal law enforcement. The path had been unexpected and often painful, but it had led me to exactly where I needed to be. The flight to London would mark the beginning of a new chapter in my career, one that would involve international cooperation and global threats. But it would also represent the continuation of the mission that had defined my adult life, protecting innocent people from those who would exploit positions of trust for personal gain. Standing at my apartment window overlooking the Chicago skyline one last time before my departure, I thought about all the federal agents who were working honestly and courageously to protect American citizens from various threats. The network investigation had shown that corruption existed within federal law enforcement, but it had also demonstrated that the vast majority of federal agents were people of integrity who were willing to police their own ranks when necessary. The work ahead would be challenging and dangerous, but it would also be meaningful in ways that transcended personal ambition or career advancement. Every corrupt agent we identified and arrested was a potential threat neutralized, a crack in the system repaired. My phone buzzed with a text message from Chen. "Safe travels. Looking forward to hearing about your international adventures when you return." As I prepared to leave for the airport, I realized that I was no longer the isolated undercover agent whose family couldn't understand her work, or the disappointed daughter whose achievements went unrecognized. I had become exactly who I was meant to be, a federal law enforcement officer whose mission was to protect the integrity of the system that protected everyone else. The plane to London would carry me toward new challenges and new opportunities to serve, but it would also carry me toward a future where the lessons learned from Maya's wedding revelation and the network investigation would continue to shape federal law enforcement for years to come. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.